Creatures of the Night. Chapter 3. Beware. One. When midnight came and Jim had thoroughly spoiled the plot of Poltergeist, he was packing a bong on the front steps while Cameron sat next to him. Cameron didn't smoke weed, but he didn't mind that Jim did. He produced a pack of cigarettes from his coat pocket so as to not feel left out. Cameron waited for Jim to take a large rip before asking him what he'd wanted to know all night. He knew Jim would always let his guard down when he was stoned, and was down to tell you pretty much anything. He released the cloud of smoke and Cameron took a small hit off his cigarette, which left a small trail in comparison. "So," Cameron said to Jim after he set the bong down, "what exactly did you see when we got here? I know you were looking at something on the roof." It was obvious that Jim had intentionally not explained himself when this happened, but his body language told Cameron that he had just brought up something his friend was trying to forget. A look of fear washed over his face as his eyes once again darted to the skies, followed by a look of embarrassment. He put his hands over his face and fought himself for an answer to the question. "I don't know, man. You had me scared talking about ghosts and all that, and my mind was just filling in the blanks with things, I think. It's like not something we should really talk about." "You didn't answer my question, man. I told you what I saw. Now what did you see?" I didn't want to freak you out any more than you already are, I guess." "Well, we were driving up, right? Talking about the movie and everything. On the roof, there was this, I don't know what it was. It almost looked like a guy. A really big guy, and I don't know what was on his face, if he had goggles or what. But it looked like he had these really big, shiny eyes, and they really caught the headlights for a moment. Like an owl," Cameron chimed in. "What made you think it was a person, and not just a bird? Like, how big was it?" "Dude, it was huge. If it was a bird, it's bigger than anything I've ever seen. Plus, I thought it was a person because of the way it kind of reacted to being in the light. Like, if an owl gets bothered by the light, it's just gonna fly away. But this thing, whatever it was, I swear I saw it walk out of the way. Kind of ducked its head behind the chimney, like it didn't want to be seen." Jim imitated the motion as best he could. Cameron thought for a moment, his eyes mindlessly scanning the dark trees for birds, while Jim took his second bong hit. "Well, at least it's good to know I'm not the only one seeing things. It's a good thing I have some time off work to figure this out, though. Something about all this weirdness feels important. Like it's close to me," Cameron said. "Well, I only work weekends," Jim said, smiling. "Did I mention that part?" Cameron assumed Jim had forgotten the detail from his job description earlier, as to seem like less of a stoner bum. The weekends are the busiest, and, well, I can't really stand sitting around all day on a Tuesday waiting for someone to come in, you know? But look, I don't want you going crazy in here by yourself, alright? So I'll stay with you for a couple of days. Besides, you got me intrigued. I gotta swing home tomorrow and grab some stuff. I think I have just the thing. Cameron was relieved he wouldn't be going through this alone, but also got an aching feeling that he had just roped his friend into something neither of them were ready for. Sure, we can stop by. Thanks, man. For staying, I mean. Cameron said, and patted Jim on the shoulder as he cleaned the ash from his bong. We should get some sleep then. Something tells me we'll be able to make better judgment calls about all this in the daylight. As the two men stepped in through the front door, Cameron took one last look at the thin ring of trees that surrounded the property, and then shut the door behind him. High in a tree near the driveway sat a figure well out of sight, its large eyes fixed on the isolated house. The thing squatted on a branch that sagged under its mass and swayed slightly in the nighttime breeze. It used its clawed, talon-like feet and hands to hold steady. Massive wings rose from the creature's back like a dark angel as it leapt from its perch and sailed into the blackness of night. Two. The skin on William's wrists burned as a rope was tied tightly and secured him to a lone tree that sat at the center of a small clearing. The rope cut off all circulation to his hands, but the hulking beast that tied it didn't seem to have much care for the man's comfort. Once its job was done, the thing squatted in front of him, watching to make sure he didn't try and escape. William didn't want to think of what the thing might do if he did try and run. A thin line of saliva repelled from the dog's mouth, like it probably used to when watching its master eat a steak. It knew it shouldn't rip William apart and eat him, but it was only the commands it was given that kept it in line. Its biology was telling it that it needed food, and that voice was only a little quieter than the one holding it back. It looked like it used to be a yellow lab, with dark eyes that bore into William's, refusing to even look at anything else. That was, until its ears perked up at a sound, something which William could not make out at first. Soon, though, it became clear that the dog was listening to someone talk, or rather, a conversation. Through the trees to his right, William could see the faint glow of a light in what appeared to be a similar clearing. It was difficult to hear anything at first, until a voice rose above the nighttime ambience. He recognized the voice as Father Elric's, and he recognized the call as one of pain and desperation. Clear as day, the words,
"What the fuck did you do to me?"
rang out through the dark woods. It was an emotion that he had never heard Father Elric use before. The man was usually calm, thoughtful, and concise when he spoke, and he certainly never cursed. The low chatter of speech continued before Elric erupted again, this time yelling,
For the love of God, come back here.
Then, there was silence. The guard dog in front of him tilted its head curiously, ears perking up. The only noise now was a nondescript groaning that bellowed from the other clearing. As his mind raced with what terrible things could be happening to Elric, William twisted his wrists nervously against the rope that bound them. It was far too tight to slip through, but his hands were able to feel a sharp rock that poked from the dirt at the base of the tree, intertwined in its roots. The rock had a jagged edge, and William began rubbing the taut rope over the roughest part. The beast remained interested in whatever it could hear from the other clearing, eyes trained through the trees. A scream erupted from the woods. The sound disturbed William to the point where he almost yelled himself, pulling harder on his restraints. It was a tortured scream that resonated and distorted, like whatever had produced it had gone through a severe transformation. Oh no, William thought. They turned Elric into one of those things. Into one of them. Suddenly, a chorus of monstrous howls exploded from the dark woods, including from the creature that stood in front of him in some sort of twisted celebration. A bead of sweat rolled down William's nose while he pushed his body to the limit. He rocked back and forth against the tree, his restraints frayed against the rock as blood trickled down his hands and wetted his clenched fists. Whatever they had done to Elric, they were going to do it to him, if not worse. Finally, he felt the strands give way as the rope released its grip and flopped to the ground. As soon as it did, the monster stopped looking into the woods and turned its attention back towards him. A slimy tongue ran over shiny, dagger-like teeth. It lowered itself down to his level so that the two were face to face and began to move closer, walking on all fours like a chimp. It brought its nose to William's face and began sniffing him. The thing's breath smelled horrendous, like it had eaten nothing but rotten eggs for a week. It prodded at him in an act of curiosity mixed with hunger. A line of drool dripped from the foul-smelling mouth and onto his cheek where it began to slide its way down William's face. It took everything in his power not to bring a free hand up and wipe the putrid trail away, but he had to act like he was still restrained. While the rope was the only physical barrier holding him there, it would still take a miracle for him to escape alive. If he made a break for it now, something told him he wouldn't get very far. The situation was practically hopeless. Not only had he failed the Washingtons, he'd failed Elric. He'd failed Steve Flynn. He'd failed practically everyone in his life, even the redemption he hoped to build. An overflow of emotion built up inside the young man, as he felt a tear fall from his eye. The feeling of the rolling tear was interrupted by the harsh sensation of a sandpaper tongue that lapped it up. His eyes opened to find the beast staring into them. Now that he looked into the eyes close up, he recognized more than that of a dog or person-turned-dog creature. There was something else in the eyes that shifted just behind them. Something that recognized the fear and pain in William's expression and loved it, fed off it, craved for more. The thing brought a long clawed nail up to William's chest and pointed just below his collarbone. He cried out in pain as it stuck the nail deep and dragged downwards, slicing through not only William's shirt, but the supple pale skin beneath. Another set of tears fled from his eyes and were greedily licked up by the disfigured mouth that stunk of rot and sulfur. Once its finger reached the base of his chest, the beast brought it up again, ready to scratch another trench into the man's torso. Its attention, however, was suddenly diverted to the other side of the clearing. In an instant, the beast hopped away. It was an action that reminded William of a child getting caught with their hand in the cookie jar. He spun around to face whatever the thing became attentive to, making sure to keep his free hands wrapped behind the tree. From the darkness emerged a pair of figures, both dressed in identical green robes with hoods that covered their faces.
"Is your God watching, altar boy?"
one of them asked. From all directions, the dogs emerged to line the perimeter of the clearing. His captor moved to the outside and joined them.
"I don't want him to miss this. You know, it's not every day one of his servants will eat another alive."
The hooded figures stepped aside to reveal yet another monster, this one noticeably taller than the others. It must have stood at around 7 feet, and its fur was a stark white with gray spots. A tattered black overcoat still clung to its form, allowing William to be sure who it used to be. "No," William said under his breath, as the thing raised its head and locked eyes with him. When he processed the look in the eyes of the beast, he felt the same pain-hungry stare that was shared by the other creature. Elric was gone. It pulled back its lips into a bloody, grimacing snarl.
"Now, Father,"
the talkative one said to the abomination,
"don't wait for us to hold hands and say grace. Go ahead and dig in."
The figure laughed as the lumbering beast took 2 large steps forward, a string of drool dangling from its canine lips. Three. Going to sleep when it was actually dark outside felt strange to Cameron. It had been months since he'd gotten a full night's sleep, as most of them had been spent sitting behind a cash register from dusk to dawn. Jim laid on the couch, hardly defined at all by the dark living room. Cameron couldn't imagine sleeping there, or in any other room of the house besides his own. Though it seemed Jim was hyped up on one of his ghost stories coming to life, so it wasn't a problem that he was desolate. He walked up the creaky stairs, leaving Jim alone in the dark abyss that was the first floor. The house was completely silent, aside from the steady footsteps that Cameron produced as he climbed to the top. That was, until he reached the final step, at which point he picked up on a subtle noise. It was a soft, steady, sliding sound. It was the kind of sound made when moving a piece of furniture across the floor, or closing a sliding closet door. The way it sounded sent a chill up Cameron's spine. He got the impression by the careful softness of the noise that whatever had made it was trying not to be heard. What scared him more was that the sound had originated from the room across from his own, his mother's bedroom. The door had been locked since Cameron inherited the house. He had never been incentivized to open it. His Uncle John, who handled his mother's affairs and looked after her towards the end of her life, had told him to keep it closed. By the tone in John's voice, Cameron assumed there was something inside that he would not want to see. Getting close to the door, he stuck his head right up next to the keyhole and peered inside. The darkness of the room made it impossible to discern anything in particular. He'd had so little interest in opening the door over the years that he had completely forgotten where the key even was. Standing at the door for a moment longer, he strained his ears for any more noises within. The house, however, was still as dead as it had been since the day Emily died. With a sigh and a tap of his forehead against the wooden door, Cameron turned and moved into his own room. His door then closed and locked to mirror the other across the hall. For a man with insomnia, it was an alien feeling to lay down at night and be lulled away without a single thought. When he awoke again to the darkness outside his window, he remembered everything. The spirit guide, the task, his mother's soul in peril. Sure enough, the ghostly figure who called himself Noah stood in the corner of his shadow-sullen room. "Well done, Cameron," he said. "I sense another soul within these walls. Your mother is within reach of saving now." Something about the experience made Cameron feel like he was on drugs. His mind was loopy, blurry, and he couldn't pinpoint what exactly it was, but there was something his brain refused to think about. A thought that was censored in his own mind. Without him thinking of them, his mouth sprouted words. "What shall I do next?" he asked, in a voice that didn't sound like his own. Excellent question. You see, all trapped souls are restrained by chains of their own making. In their self-purgatory, they always subconsciously create a way for it to be ended. A part of them secretly hoping that one day they will be set free. Your mother is no different. Somewhere in this house is a key and a box. Think of this box as your mother's spiritual tomb. When unlocked and opened, her soul will be freed from her self-made prison. Tomorrow, you must search the house. Find the key. I will do what I can to guide you in the waking world. Noah, feeling his message had been received, began to open the window. When Cameron was finally able to choke out a few words that he actually thought of. What are you keeping from me? Again and again, his brain denied him access to information that seemed important, if not obvious. Noah's face grew into a scowl as he slid the window closed and approached Cameron's bedside. The strange man bent down to meet his gaze. One of the shaggy hairs fell from his head and floated onto Cameron's pillow. The man's face was gaunt, his features sunken and jagged. It almost felt like he was looking into a funhouse mirror. In fact, the ghost's eyes looked awfully similar to his own, a trait Emily had always attributed to his absent father. Finally, the spirit bent low and spoke. The words knocked all other thoughts from Cameron's mind. Find the key. Don't trust a soul, not even your own. In a swift motion, the man was gone, soaring out the open window and into the starry night sky. As quickly as before, Cameron was pulled from the waking world and into a deep slumber. When he awoke again, the clock had just struck 11 a.m. Faint beams of morning light fought their way through his dark blinds. He rose and shifted them to the side, allowing light to pour in. He began to put on his clothes, noting how rested and refreshed he felt, when he noticed something strange on his bed. Laying next to the pillow was an unusually large, black feather. Four. Aside from its staggering height when compared to the other monsters, the first thing William noticed about Father Elric's new form was how bony and elongated everything was. Its arms were spindly, fingers like spiders that twitched and grasped with minds of their own. The candlelight that encircled the patch of land revealed that from the jagged joints beneath the creature's fur protruded long spikes that looked like bone. A white tail dragged on the ground behind it, a feature most of the other hybrids seemed to lack. Its familiar eyes bore into William, though he knew there was nothing left of Elric behind them. they were just a facade, a smokescreen for something darker. Something that wanted to look, but didn't want to be seen. The gangly creature circled the center tree, the way vultures would circle a carcass on the roadside, never taking those eyes off its delectable captive. To his surprise, William overheard the two cloaked men as they seemed to argue amongst each other at a whisper. It soon escalated to the point of talking, where he could overhear.
This is not what he ordered.
One figure said. Can't you see I'm doing this for him? Once this is done, it'll show that God is nothing but...
There is no God. We can't waste time and resources on some petty show for nothing. You should have just slit their throats and fed them like that old couple. This obsession is getting close to heresy.
But look at it. It's a symbol. That means...
The only symbol that should matter to you are the ones he provides. These ridiculous games make a mockery of his vision.
Come on, this is what we've all dreamed of. Can't we at least let them kill each other?
Go on, then. Watch your spiteful little game. I'm sending the perfect ones back to work, lest he be any more displeased.
With that statement, the ring of dogmen dispersed into the trees, and one of the hooded figures departed in the direction of that awful cabin. All that remained now was the other cloaked man, a terrified William, and the abomination that Elric unfortunately became. The black trench coat he once wore looked comically small on the beast. The tightness of the coat revealed a bulge in the left pocket. At that point, William remembered Father Elric putting his hand in there when they first reached the cabin before they were attacked. If he had some kind of weapon in that pocket, he didn't get a chance to use it. Maybe William could. He would have to wait for the thing to get closer. Then, he would grab it. It was his only chance.
Come on!
The remaining cloaked man yelled at the beast, causing it to turn its head and look at him. This revealed to William the bony spines that ran from the creature's skull down to its tail.
Just fucking eat him already!
The man shouted, and angrily threw a stick at the thing's head. Instantly, the creature twisted its position and bounded towards the tree at a breakneck speed before it was right up in William's face. It sniffed him, close enough for William to see that blood trickled from its eyes like uncontrollable tears. The eyes themselves were like he expected. Elric's, but misused. Bloodshot and wild like a crack addict. The beast found interest in the open gash on William's chest. It began licking up the blood that was soaked into his torn shirt. If it had noticed his hand reaching into its jacket pocket, it didn't seem to care. William's grasp reached something when the man yelled again.
Is he dead yet? Why isn't he screaming? Rip him apart!
Taking this as his last opportunity, William wrenched whatever it was from the pocket and held it up. As soon as it was in his hand, he knew it was Elric. Only, it wasn't really him. It was the feeling he got when Elric was around him, when he talked to him about redemption. No. What his fingers wrapped around was more than the man. It was the idea he embodied. He was holding faith. The object was cold, like metal, but effortless to lift as he did to block the oncoming attack of 4-inch fangs about to chomp around his neck. William's eyes were held shut, but he could feel the evil presence being whisked away, its rotten breath finally lifting from the air around his face. When his eyes opened, the beast was flung back about 5 feet. It sat on its knees, pawing at a deformed face that appeared burned, with trails of smoke sailing towards the sky. The thing howled in pain, and William took the opportunity, much like he had the last time he found himself trapped in those woods, to run for his fucking life. Behind him, he heard the cloaked figure yelling obscenities at his crooked creation, ordering it to chase after William and finish the job. It didn't take long until he heard branches snapping behind him as the towering beast followed the random path through the trees. Every now and then, he would get a whiff of that sour-smelling breath as he ran, which told him to pick up the speed. After about 2 minutes of cat and mouse, William found himself on the ground, having tripped over a log. The pale creature approached quickly behind him. Though he still didn't understand what it was, he produced the piece of faith from his pocket yet again, this time with his eyes open. He held it up and finally saw what it was. A silver crucifix, Father Elric's, which he kept above the door in his quarters. When the thing got close to the cross in his hand, its skin began to melt. It peeled and bubbled, falling to the ground in sloppy chunks to reveal muscles, tendons, and pink bones that began to rot away as well. Despite this, the monster continued to push closer and closer. A pale, disfigured hand was extended, with claws that disintegrated as they attempted to grab at the piece of metal. Long fingers withered and curled, soon turning to mush in a fashion that reminded William of when he used to take a lighter to his army men, burning them until their guns twirled into a blackened spiral. Finally, the thing relented and was repelled back into a tree. It placed its remaining hand over the remnants of its unholy visage, and with a limp, it melted back into the darkness of the woods. William stood, thanking God for the miracle that was granted to him. He looked down at the metal handheld cross. To the back of it was bound a small book, as well as what appeared to be a car key. The little book intrigued him, but he didn't have time to investigate it. He slipped the items back into his pocket for safekeeping, as he hurried off in the opposite direction of where the beast had gone. Five. When Cameron went downstairs in the morning, Jim was sitting at the table covered in old mail and random junk. Before him was a mug of steaming black coffee, next to his ashy bong. The counter had a couple of grocery bags on it, along with some of Jim's personal things. Rise and shine, Blakey. You sure took your time sleeping in, huh? Cameron looked at the clock on the stove. It read 11 a.m., a time he was used to dozing off at. Apparently, he said. How'd you sleep? Fine. That couch is pretty comfortable. You know, better than a lot I've slept on. I gotta ask, though. Did you have any nightmares last night? Like, about the house? Cameron searched his mind for the dream he knew he had. He remembered details of it, namely a pale gaze staring at him from the darkness. The familiar face of someone he'd forgotten. It was there, then gone. Probably. I have nightmares pretty much every night. Can't remember any details, though. Why? Jim turned his chair and motioned towards the hallway. He pointed at the door on the left wall, the one that led to the basement. I think there's something in there we should see. In my dream, I was beckoned through the house to that door. Whatever's in there, it didn't let me see. I tried opening it, but the door is locked, so I went and ran some errands while you slept the day away. Is that what all this is? Cameron gestured towards the pair of overflowing grocery bags. What's wrong with the food in the pantry? Jim looked disgusted at the question. Where do I start? Your coffee tastes like battery acid. What isn't stale or moldy in your fridge is expired. You don't have any snacks. Hell, the only edible thing I could find was your stockpile of non-perishable canned foods. Are you preparing for the apocalypse, buddy? Touché, Cameron said. It had been a while since an outsider had gone through his food. He almost forgot it wasn't normal to eat canned soup and beans for every meal. Besides, Jim went on, I had to get some stuff from home since I'm staying for a few. Oh yeah, and that reminds me. He reached inside his pocket and pulled out a car key. He then tossed it to Cameron. What the hell, man? You took my car? Oh, I'm sorry, Jim said. A big sleep driver, are you? You should be thanking me. I filled up your empty gas tank. Plus, I got you coffee that doesn't taste like shit. So just grab a mug and take a seat, Blake. It seemed Cameron wasn't getting any over on Jim this morning as he complied, pouring a mug of steaming coffee and helping himself to one of the donuts on the table. See? Isn't it better? Jim asked as Cameron took his first sip. It was the best sip of coffee he'd ever had, but he didn't want Jim to know. It's okay, he said. Liar. That's the good shit and you know it. Now, do you even have a key to that door? What's in there? Jim pointed to the hallway basement door again. That's the basement. The key. Key. His eyes were brought to a drawer in the corner that he practically never looked in. It was so full of old junk that it hardly opened. It had screws, post-its, pencils, staplers, paper clips, receipts, and at the bottom, a ring of keys. It was odd, the way he internally knew where they were, whereas if you would have asked him a week ago, he couldn't have given you 100 possible locations. But there they were, in the drawer where he'd thrown them a half-decade before, back when he had no intention of ever unlocking anything. The basement's nothing special, you know, he said. It's mostly full of my mom's furniture. Some of my uncle's too, I think. This used to be their family home, before my grandparents moved away. They left it to my mom. My only memory of downstairs is getting scared as a kid. There was this huge, ornate mirror that was down there. Just this towering thing. I looked into it and I don't know. Something about what I saw scared me. I don't remember what it was, but scared me enough not to go down there again until I was an adult. You know, in Poltergeist, the haunting is caused because the house is built on top of an Indian burial ground. Their restless spirits taking revenge for the desecration of their sacred land. You don't think we'll find anything like that down there, do you? Jim asked. He seemed to be only half joking when he did. There was a true unease beneath his friend's eyes that Cameron picked up on. Anyways, is the mirror still there? Yeah, I think so. There's a sheet over it, though. At least, last time I was down there. I'm not trying to look into it again, man. No? Do you think it's the source of this haunting? Maybe you saw a ghost in there as a kid and that's what scared you, Jim said. Could be. It's worth looking into, I guess. Cameron sighed. I'm off the deep end at this point. Anything could be the cause of this, and I'd be willing to accept it. Same here, Jim said. That's why I brought this. I bought it a few years back and just kind of forgot about it, you know. I never could get it to work, but maybe my house just wasn't haunted enough. From one of his personal bags, Jim produced a wide wooden board and a small planchette. There were all kinds of letters across the board, but the complete word at the top read Ouija. Along with it, he held a bag of candles. You would actually buy one of those. Aren't they like a proven scam to sell you a printed piece of wood? Aw, what happened to being off the deep end, Blakey? You'll see once we're down there commuting with spirits by that creepy mirror. Now get off your ass and open the door. Cameron set down his half-eaten donut and rose to his feet. All of the keys on the ring appeared almost identical, brass-colored and of a similar shape. It wasn't until the fifth one he tried that the lock accepted it. The rust that had calcified deep within the mechanism gave way as the door opened for the first time in half a decade. It swung open to reveal a dark passage that descended downwards. No light escaped the opening, the only visible thing being a large quantity of cobwebs that clung to the ceiling in the corners. Well, get down there, Mr. Ouija, Cameron said, and gave Jim a slap on the back. His face was stony, set in a look that said the joke wasn't funny anymore. Nonetheless, he descended down the stairs. Cameron followed behind him, the old steps squealing in discomfort as the two men reached the bottom. With the yank of a hanging chain, Jim switched on a light bulb to reveal the sullen room. A thick cloud of dust hung in the air of the crowded space. "Told you it wasn't much," Cameron said. Lining the wall were shelves mostly full of unmarked boxes. The floor was cluttered with furniture. Chairs, tables, rugs, and artwork, all placed in a way that at one point was surely organized and tidy, but now sat in a thick layer of grime that made the scene look ancient, like they had just stepped into a tomb. Jim dropped the Ouija board in the center of the open floor, a mass of dust puffing up around it as he did. Encircling it, he began to place the ceremonial candles. Midway through setting them up, he got distracted, staring at every corner of the room, his gaze landing on Cameron. "Where's the mirror?" he asked. He did a sweep of the room with his own eyes, and sure enough, the mirror was nowhere to be seen. At least, not the towering, ornate one that had scared him as a child. I don't know," Cameron said, honestly. "I guess maybe my uncle has it. It was right there, though," he said, and gestured to a corner in front of a covered couch and a pile of stacked, cobwebbed chairs. "It was creepy, man. I don't know. At least we can rule it out as the source of the haunting, I guess. Oh, and do you see any Indian graves down here?" The concrete floor was dusty and old, but there was nothing obviously wrong with it. "No," Jim said. "Almost smells like it, though. Do you smell that?" Cameron took a deep whiff in. It wasn't a pleasant-smelling place, that was for sure. But above the usual mildew and mold, there was another scent. One that stunk of sulfur, of rot, the smell of decay. "You're right. Must be something dead beneath all this stuff. Maybe a mouse? No chance I'm doing a deep clean anytime soon, though." Smells like more than just a mouse, man. You might have a whole rat king under one of those shelves," Jim said, as he continued to light the candles around the circle. "A what now?" Cameron asked. "A rat king. It's a phenomenon that happens with dead rats in tight spaces. Their tails get all tied together into a big ball. Even if some of them are still alive, they're unable to free their tails and end up dying with the rest. The result is this mass of tangled rat corpses that stinks to high hell. I had to help my dad clean one out of his attic last summer. Oh, the stench up there. It was torture." The smell of the room, combined with Jim's disgusting description, caused bile to build in the back of Cameron's throat. His eyes scanned the room, hoping he could identify where a dead rat graveyard was most likely to be. The structure of the basement was quite simple. Metal shelves lined 3 of the walls, and in front of them were stacks of cardboard boxes that covered most of their contents. In order to properly check beneath the shelves, the place where he figured a rat king was most likely to be, he would have to start pushing boxes away from the sidewalls. Upon revealing the bottom shelf on the far wall, Cameron found that it was covered in old books, the gaps between which would be perfect for a rat to crawl in and die. The smell was stronger when he stuck his nose to the ground, which made him think he might have been close to finding it. Flipping between book after book, he found that most of them consisted of mystery and romance novels, a staple of his mother's study. Something loose caught his eye. Positioned between a pair of novels was an old photograph. Cameron grabbed it and shook it to get the dust off. It was a colorless photo that depicted his mother and a man sitting on the hood of a car. His mom was unmistakable, strikingly beautiful as she was up until the end of her life. Her hair was done up in a swirl on top of her head like a beehive. She wore a pair of knee-high boots and a floral dress. The man on the hood next to her wasn't smiling like she was. Rather, his stony expression made him look mysterious and cool. He wore a dark jacket and jeans that left his ankles exposed. In his hand was a cigarette, held close to his mouth as if he had just paused his drag to pose for the photo. His hair was dark and unkempt, as was his beard. His cold eyes bore a familiar stare into the camera. One Cameron knew, but could not place. The man's free hand was wrapped around his mother's shoulders. On the back of the photo, there was a note in Emily's handwriting. "Hey Blake," Jim said, breaking his attention. "You ready to do this thing?" The Ouija board sat in the center of the room, now surrounded by a ring of lit candles. Cameron stuck the photograph into his pocket and joined his friend in the circle. Jim reached up and pulled the light's chain, plunging the room into darkness, save for the orange glow from the ring of candles. Jim took a seat at the board, so Cameron did across from him. Both of them placed a finger from each hand onto the plastic planchette in the middle. "If I feel you start to move this thing, I'm slapping you," Cameron said. Only Jim didn't crack a smile. His eyes were focused on the board, that look returning. "Are you ready to start?" Jim asked. Yeah. Let's do it," he said, not sure exactly what that meant. "Hear me, spirits from beyond. Is there anyone there to communicate with us living souls?" For a moment, the room was silent. But then, beneath their fingers, the planchette shifted in its place. Six. William emerged from the thick woods and collapsed to his knees on the open patch of ground. His new shirt was almost more destroyed than the last one, as it was covered in small cuts from the branches, along with the large gash the Labrador gouged into him. He felt tears well in his eyes again as he bent his head back and stared into the false sky. Above him was an array of dim stars, along with an unusually large crescent moon. It was so close that William felt he could count the craters, and swore he could see the rock rotating in space before his eyes. Either that, or his head was spinning from all the running he had just done, fueled by fear and adrenaline. Now that he was no longer in immediate danger, his body felt like little more than a husk. His muscles ached like they never had before. While he had gone nights without sleeping in the past, he had never physically exerted himself on the day after. He felt as though he could collapse on the spot and drift off to sleep. Though if he did, there was little hope he would ever escape the nightmare. Falling to one side on the grass, he held an arm across his bleeding torso. His joints were inflamed, and his cuts burned like there was salt in them. Not to mention the feeling in his head. A pounding that started at the base of his neck, like a nail being hammered in deeper and deeper and deeper, until it reached the center of his brain and threatened to come out the other side. The path he laid on had deep trenches carved into it, tire tracks that seemed to swerve from one side to the other. Down the road a little ways, William saw the moonlight reflect off a pair of red objects in the dark. To his relief, these didn't appear to be the eyes of a demonic killer. Rather, part of something man-made. The reflectors on the taillights of a vehicle. Mustering up what little strength he had left, William was able to rise to his feet and began walking towards the mysterious car. As he got closer, it became apparent that the vehicle towered over him. It was a camper van. The door on one side was unlatched and open, swaying slightly in the nighttime breeze. He wasted no time climbing inside, hoping it would be his ticket to safety. The battery was dead as he twisted the key in the ignition. No matter how many times he did, the engine gave no response. A patch of dried blood appeared to leak from the top of the steering wheel. It was then that he noticed the car's windshield was completely smashed. In his desperate haze, William hadn't even processed that the vehicle was totaled and wouldn't be going anywhere. The previous driver seemed to have a nasty crash in the tree line, and they were no doubt treated poorly by the locals. Looking to the roof of the vehicle, he noticed long, deep gashes that confirmed his suspicions. Accepting the dead husk for what it was, he decided to climb back and check out the residential part of the RV. The sight wasn't much. Even without the crash creating so much disorder, there was little furniture to make a home. The main thing he noticed was a bed and a mini-fridge. The fridge was empty, but contained remnants of something that stank. The bed, however, was upright and appeared relatively untouched. It seemed God was offering William the opportunity to rest, and he didn't plan on passing it up. Before he laid on the bed, he noticed a red object on the floor. It was a flashlight, the large glass lens of which was a little cracked. When he switched the button, however, the light spurred to life. Its retention was no doubt due to the giant battery it housed. Before drawing any unwanted attention, he made sure to close the side door and cover the windows. Once he did, he found himself with a little relief. The glow was orange, the same color a warm fire would be. He felt that warmness grow as he retrieved a thick wool blanket from the corner and dusted off the glittery shards of glass that peppered it. Wrapping himself, he laid down on the mattress and freed the objects from his pocket, placing them on the floor next to the bed. He laid in the fetal position and brought his legs close to his chest. The soft pillow was a perfect place for his aching head. The hammer had done its work for the night as the throbbing subsided. Under the orange light, the crucifix seemed to glow, which caused William to reach down and grab it. It was cold to the touch, but comforting. The metal was brilliantly shiny, and it was engraved with deep Gothic symbols and shapes. Around it was bound a thick twine, something he would often see Father Elric use to bind his books and documents. Spinning it around, he saw the key and journal on the back. He untied the thread and allowed the items to separate, then stowed the crucifix and car key beneath the wool blanket. Turning his body so the light hit the pages, he opened the moleskin journal. The paper inside was stained, warped, and firm, like something had been spilled on it. The identity of the initials PM that engraved the cover became apparent on the first page. It read, "This journal is property of Patrick Morgan." He began to flip through the pages, skimming entries that seemed to be documenting responsibilities for the day. Father Elric was mentioned constantly. Dinner with Elric, confession with Elric, mass with Elric. Whoever Patrick Morgan was, it seemed they had spent even more time with the old father than William had. Checking the dates on these entries, he read September 1977. Thinking about it, William did remember Father Morgan being mentioned once or twice in passing. In fact, he knew the man was buried in the church graveyard. He remembered Father Elric being resistant when explaining the cause of death, only stating that he wished he could have done more, that he had the option to help the young man, and felt as though he had failed. This explanation caused William to assume the man was addicted to drugs, something Elric could have known about but refused to act on. That, or he took his own life, and Elric was unable to talk him down from the ledge. With these theories in mind, he wondered why Elric would have the journal on such an urgent and dangerous house call, bound to his holy cross no less. As he flipped through the journal, however, the reason for its presence became more apparent. Around late October of 1977, the entries began to devolve from simple recountings of the day into mad ramblings that spanned pages at a time. At a certain point, the writer didn't bother to add a date at the top, opting to get right into whatever it was on his mind. Interspersed between the chunks of text, William would sometimes see a sketch, one of which instantly caught his eye. Penciled into the page was a near-perfect drawing of a dog man, identical to Prince and the perfect ones, as the cloaked man had called them. The sketch, however, was drawn 5 years before. The dog thing shared every quality he was used to seeing now. The gangly limbs, the sharpened fangs, the oddly human eyes. Beneath the sketch was a single note. "I can still feel those eyes on me." Within William's mind, a piece fell into place. The previous cycle, Elric's guilt, the dates on the pages, it all added up. Father Morgan knew about the demonic activity back when it was happening the first time. That was why Father Elric was so absorbed when it happened again. His basement full of documents and evidence, him acting more like a detective than a priest. It was because he felt he owed it to Patrick. The question in William's mind then became, what did happen to Father Morgan? He feared he already knew. The man was ripped apart by a monster, killed by one of those abhorrent creatures of the night. Before his brain could think up a gruesome scenario of the late priest's demise, however, he dozed off to sleep, the journal falling from his hand and onto the floor of the RV. It landed open to a page with another realistic sketch. Depicted in this one was the hunched figure of a creature clad in a thick layer of feathers. It had long talons for hands and giant wings that sprouted from its back. Intelligent, saucer-like eyes dotted its face, a sharp, shiny beak between them. The only thing written beneath the sketch was a single word: beware.